How do you actually know if your nervous system is in an alarm state? Because it's not always obvious, and it's definitely not necessarily emotional. A lot of people hear fight or flight, and they immediately think that means panic, or shaking, or a racing heart, or a dramatic trauma response. And yes, it absolutely can look like that, but chronic alarm can also look like waking up exhausted. It can look like snapping at someone you love and then wondering why you reacted so strongly. Feeling like your brain can't find words, digestive issues, hormone changes, sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, chronic tension in your jaw, a rib cage that barely moves when you breathe, a body that never fully settles, a mind that keeps scanning, a tendency to collapse after doing something that shouldn't have really been that much, a sense that the world is just a little too loud, too fast, too bright, too demanding. And if that has been your normal for long enough, you may not even call it alarm. You may think of it as just your personality, your sensitivity, your anxiety, your chronic illness, your ADHD, your burnout, your lack of discipline, your inability to handle life. It's just too much. But what if a lot of what you're experiencing is actually your brain and body doing the exact right thing in response to perceived threat? What if your system is not broken at all? What if it's adapting? I'm Dr. Satya Sardonicus. I'm the founder of Neurofascial Flow Method, and this channel is about the body-based missing link in healing, resilience, and ultimately human potential. If you're dealing with mysterious health challenges, chronic fatigue, brain fog, digestive issues, or just a deep sense of burnout, you might have been told by well-meaning doctors, friends, or family members that it's all in your head, or it's just stress. And I have to tell you, I hate it when people say it that way, because what usually happens is someone has real, valid, debilitating physiological symptoms, and they're told it's just stress, which really just means to them, we don't know what to do with you. We are constantly being gaslit into believing that stress is only an emotional phenomenon. But stress is not just emotional. There's physiological stress. There's mechanical and structural stress. There's chemical stress from the environment or highly inflammatory foods. There's the energetic stress of being a highly sensitive person in an overwhelming world. And all of that stress lives inside a physical body. To understand what chronic alarm actually looks like, we have to look at how the body communicates with the brain. There's a statistic that says there are roughly 3 trillion bits of information per second passed over the human nervous system. 3 trillion bits! And we're only consciously aware of about 50 of those bits per second. Things like the temperature of the room, the brightness of the room, the sound of my voice. So what's making up the rest of that massive, incomprehensible amount of information? It's your body talking to your brain. Specifically, it's the sensory network, including your fascia, constantly feeding the brain subconscious information about pressure, stretch, movement, and whether you are safe or whether you're under threat. Fascia is the continuous spiderweb-like connective tissue that surrounds, entangles, and meshes and suspends in relationship to one another every muscle, bone, and organ in your body. And it's not just packaging, it's one of the richest sensory organs we have, containing 6 to 10 times more sensory nerve endings than muscle, specifically proprioceptors. If your body is structurally holding on to tension from a past trauma, an old injury like a car accident, or even just chronic daily postural stress from sitting at a computer or being on your phone, the stuck fascia is sending nociceptive alarm signals to your brain 24 hours a day. So even if your life is magically perfectly peaceful, even if you are meditating on a cushion, and even if you're eating perfectly clean, if you have sticky, gluey places in your physical body, those tissues are continuously telling your brain, help, I'm stuck, There's danger here. And when your brain receives those signals, it shifts into an intelligent, adaptive survival mode. I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where self actualization is at the top, right? And the foundational basic needs are at the bottom. Now, Maslow talks about food and shelter as foundational needs, but he missed something really important. We also need proprioceptive feedback, the safety signals that come from the body to the brain. Without it, all the meditation and clean eating in the world cannot get you out of alarm and into healing mode. So, this survival mode is what we commonly call sympathetic dominance or fight or flight. And if the stress is severe or chronic enough, the system can even drop past fight or flight into a state of functional freeze, known as dorsal vagal collapse. It'll often actually mix between the states, where the body is essentially trying to play dead to survive. But here's what you absolutely must understand. When your brain is in survival mode, it is not glitching. It is not broken. It neurologically suppresses certain functions on purpose to keep you alive. Cell biologist Bruce Lipton teaches that cells are either in defense mode or they're in growth and healing mode, and they can't be in both at the same time. First, it suppresses your digestion. If a tiger is actively chasing you, you do not need to digest your breakfast. We need all of your blood and resources going to your muscles so you can run or fight. So it makes perfect sense that if your nervous system is stuck in chronic alarm, you're going to experience digestive issues, malabsorption of nutrients, gut inflammation. Second, it deprioritizes your reproductive function because on a biological level, it is not safe to bring a baby into a dangerous world. Third, it shifts your immune system. It deprioritizes fighting long-term threats like deep infections or cancer, opting instead for hyperreactive, immediate allergic type responses. It's why we often see so much hypersensitivity to foods, to textures, to environments. Your system is on high alert. But one of the most profound things it suppresses is your cognitive function and your emotional capacity. Your ability to learn new things, to process complex logic, to understand another person's point of view is neurologically suppressed. Think about it. If you were busy feeling deep compassion for the tiger that is trying to eat you, you would not fight for your life. This is exactly why, in the middle of a sensory meltdown, a panic attack, or a heated argument with your spouse, reasoning and logic are completely useless. They're out the window, right? The cognitive brain is offline. Your cognitive empathy is suppressed. You literally cannot see their point of view until your nervous system feels safe again. These are all highly intelligent, brilliant adaptations. That is not your body or your brain going rogue. That is your body doing the exact right thing in the context of a perceived threat. The problem is that we are not meant to stay in that mode for weeks, months, years, or decades, like so many people do. But when we do, our body has to find a way to manage that immense allostatic stress load. When we refuse to slow down, when we override our need for rest because our culture rewards us for being hypervigilant and constantly productive, our bodies will step in to do the job for us. In mainstream society, we are taught to push, and we're given badges of honor for overriding our body's signals. We glorify the burnout culture and the hustle culture. But what happens is that our symptoms become the boundaries that we didn't set. We develop these debilitating issues so our subconscious can say, oh, now I have an excuse to say I can't go to that birthday party. My Crohn's is flaring up. Or I have a migraine. I can't take on that extra project at work. We end up with mysterious pain and exhaustion because our body is having to be the boundary we couldn't consciously set or didn't. I've seen this loop manifest in the most extreme, heartbreaking ways. Years ago, I had a woman come into my clinic with severe chronic neck pain. She was deeply dysregulated. About a week or two into her care, she came in crying. I asked her, "My gosh, what's going on? What's wrong?" And her neck pain hadn't even changed much yet, but she was crying because she said, "My husband and I have been going through a really contentious divorce for the past year and a half, and we've stopped fighting since I started this work, and we've decided to stay married." Why? Because when we used body-based proprioception to finally take her nervous system out of chronic alarm, her neurological pathways for connection and compassion turned back on. She could finally see his point of view again because she wasn't subconsciously fighting a tiger anymore. I saw the same thing with an 8-year-old girl who came to me shortly after she'd been hospitalized for attempting to take her own life. At 8, she had severe anxiety, deep depression, and her nervous system was entirely locked in a state of high alarm. I remember sitting with her and her family during her consultation. I always speak directly to the kids in these reports because so often doctors just talk over them, which drives me insane. Anyway, I looked at her and I said, "I think your system is stuck in this alarm place where everything feels dangerous and like an emergency, and it's really hard to feel safe. And I can see that there are places in your body holding that tension because we did a neurostructural assessment on her. And those tight places are keeping your brain stuck in that mode of alarm." I asked her, "Do you want to try to change this? Do you want my help?" And she started crying. She said, "We've tried so many things. I don't know how to think that it's even possible." And it broke my heart. But I sat with her and I explained that we weren't going to try to force her mind to be happy. We were going to start by signaling safety through her physical body. By the end of our conversation, she agreed to try. She wanted to try. Within 2 weeks of using neurosomatic safety signaling and gently addressing her fascial bracing, she was a completely different child. The anxiety behaviors, the food aversions, the terror, it all began to dissolve. Not because we did intensive psychological trauma processing, but because we gave her nervous system the physical signals it needed to realize the tiger wasn't actually in the room. So, how do we know when we are slipping into this state before it becomes a crisis? We have to develop somatic literacy. We need to learn how to read our own body because it is talking to you. In the neurofascial flow method, the very first skill I teach is something I call somatic tuning. Just like a musician can learn to hear if a note is a little sharp or a little flat before the entire song falls apart, you can learn to feel the subtle physical signs of your nervous system tipping into fight or flight or dissociation, either kind of alarm. Because chronic alarm thrives when it's invisible. Once you can see it and feel it and track it and support it, you begin to interrupt the loop. For everyone, the overarching theme of entering an alarm state is constriction. But the specific physical tells, if you will be slightly different for each person. For some people, the first sign of alarm is that their breath gets shallow and fast. For others, their breath might actually pause. For others, their jaw locks down. Maybe your first sign is that you feel tension gripping in your throat or a deep compression in your low back. Maybe you notice that your voice tone gets higher and buzzy. Your speaking speed gets really fast. Or maybe you notice that your familiar neck pain suddenly ticks up a few notches. We need to start paying attention to these cues because pain tolerance is not a good metric for how much we can uh, handle change and healing, right? So there's a quote I absolutely love. It's, "If you learn to listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it scream." If you're someone who is highly sensitive, neurodivergent, or navigating complex chronic illness, you may have spent a lot of your life feeling like your body is too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, I understand that deeply. I have had over 20 concussions because my brain was herniated out of my skull for decades. I am the princess and the pea, right? Even as a kid, if there was a TV on mute in the other room, I could physically feel the electromagnetic field and it bothered me. I used to want to just be less sensitive. But I've come to realize that sensitivity is a superpower. It is like having a spidey senses, right? My goal is no longer to be less sensitive. My goal is to be less reactive. When you build capacity in the nervous system, your sensitivity stops being a source of suffering and becomes your greatest source of intuition, clinical perception, and relational attunement. But to build that capacity, I never want you to just guess if your nervous system is in an alarm state. And I never want you to guess if a therapy or practitioner is actually helping you. I want you to have an objective metric. One of the most reliable, low-tech ways to measure your autonomic nervous system state right at home is by checking your peripheral vision. When your brain thinks your life is in danger, your peripheral vision physically shrinks. It creates tunnel vision so you can hyper-focus on the immediate threat. But at rest, when you are in a parasympathetic state, when you are safe to rest, digest, and heal, human beings are meant to have a full 180 degrees of peripheral vision. Let's test yours right now. You can do this sitting or standing, but I often tell people to do it standing like in a doorway so that your arms flat against the wall, you know that that's exactly 180 degrees. And also, if you're like me, you got to tuck your hair out of the way so that you can actually see out to the side. And you're going to bring both of your arms straight out to the sides like an airplane and point your thumbs up to the ceiling. And you're going to pull your arms back just a little behind that 180-degree line if you're not in the doorway. Obviously, if you're in the doorway, that's where you're going. Now you're going to stare straight ahead. Watch your own nose if you're in a mirror, or watch my nose here on the screen. Don't cheat. Don't turn your head or look to the side with your eyeballs. Your brain is going to try to cheat and look to the side because it wants to succeed. But this is not a pass-fail test. This is just information. So slowly, one arm at a time, you're going to bring your hand forward until you can clearly see your thumb in your side vision. Not just a blurry blob. You need to actually be able to see this is a thumb. And then when you see it, freeze that arm and do the same on the other side. So you're going to bring each side one at a time forward slowly until you see the thumb and then freeze there. And then keeping your arms in that spot, you're going to look around and you're going to make a mental note of where your arms are pointing. Are they pointing at a door frame? Are they pointing at a specific painting on the wall? If your arms are forward at all from that flat 180-degree line, that tells us that your nervous system is sitting in some degree of sympathetic dominance or alarm right now. I've actually seen patients in such extreme trauma states that their arms had come almost entirely in front of their face before they could see their thumbs. But here's the most important part of this exercise. If your visual field is narrow, please do not judge it. You are not failing. You're not doing anything wrong. This is not a test that you pass or fail. It is simply information. Your body is intelligently protecting you based on the stress load it's currently under. So you can use this peripheral visual field test as a baseline metric for your daily life. You can check it before and after you have a difficult conversation. You can check it before and after you go to physical therapy, psychotherapy, or the chiropractor. Ideally, any therapy you do should not make this worse. If a therapy makes your visual field shrink further forward, that tells you that the practitioner exceeded your nervous system's capacity to integrate that change and actually caused more nervous system dysregulation. At minimum, a therapy needs to leave it unchanged. But ideally, a good therapeutic input will bring your nervous system out of the experience of alarm and into safety, and you'll actually see your visual field widen. Healing is not about forcing the body to let go of its protection. It's about creating the conditions where the body no longer needs to hold on in the same way. When a caterpillar goes into the chrysalis to become a butterfly, it doesn't just sprout wings. It literally turns into liquid goo. Transformation can feel like complete and utter destruction. And to heal, You need a safe container, a chrysalis, to hold you while your system reorganizes. We cannot skip straight to fixing. We cannot just rip away the armor. We need to establish somatic safety in the body first. We have to partner with the body's innate intelligence. In the next episode, I'm going to guide you through a simple 3-minute body-based reset that you can use whenever you feel overwhelmed, braced, shut down, or reactive. It is a zero-cost tool using proprioceptive feedback that you can use to immediately signal safety to your brain and widen that visual field. But for today, I want you to simply practice noticing. Check your peripheral vision. Notice your body's signs of constriction versus expansion. Start building that somatic literacy. If this resonates with you, subscribe so YouTube knows to show you future videos. And if you want to dive deeper into how your fascia and nervous system are connected, I've linked a free guide below. I'm Dr. Satya, and this is Human Coherence. I'll see you in the next video.